Hey, Catherine, thanks so much for making time today. We're really excited to have you a part of this podcast series.
Thanks. Me too.
So, I want to start with an understanding of what you currently do. I know you're an attorney and you're practice local, but if you want to describe a little bit about what type of law that you currently practice, that would be great.
All right. So I guess I would call the type of law I practice business law, which is a very broad brush way to describe what I do. What I really do is I represent business owners,
Mhm.
and because all of the businesses that I represent are closely held or small companies, and
Mhm.
so what I really like doing is working with the owners of those businesses with regard to legal issues that they can't solve themselves. Um, Basically, to either make their business stronger, to make their ownership interest more protected, to assist them with working out disputes or agreements between and among other owners.
Mhm.
And I also represent their businesses as entities, if they have employment issues or other business issues, whether it's, drafting contracts, reviewing license agreements, reviewing commercial leases, drafting independent contractor agreements and such. But my real passion is working with the owners, because they're people. A business entity is a fictionally created entity. The owner is a person, and that's who I really like working with.
Oh, that's kind of neat. So, lots of small to mid-sized businesses and those
Yes,
kind of entities.
yes. Well, I think the SBA definition of a small business is 500 employees or less or something. But most of the companies that I represent, or the business owners that I represent, own businesses that have probably between 10 and 50
Mhm.
employees,
Right.
and not 500.
Gotcha, gotcha. All right, so I want to take you back to
Okay.
either high school or college, wherever you feel comfortable. Is this your lifelong dream? Did you wake up one morning and say, "I want to be a lawyer and I want to work with small businesses and owners of small businesses and help them with their legal issues," or where did that come from?
I did not wake up one day, either in high school or college, or frankly, even a couple of years after college, and say, this is what I want to do in terms of, my career. So after I got out of high school, I went to college, and I was in a situation where I was pretty much, I'm going to say, forced to go to a local school because my parents didn't have the funding for me to, go away to school. So I was fortunate enough to be living in a city that had then and still does a good college or university nearby, and University of North Carolina at Charlotte. And so I went to college and got an accounting degree. And the reason I decided to major in accounting is because I knew I needed something useful and marketable, and I enjoyed math. So, not a whole lot of thought went into it, but, and then I got out of college and ended up working for a large banking company in North Carolina, in Charlotte. And
As an
I was
accountant?
actually pardon,
As an accountant?
as an internal auditor.
Go.
So, kind of the accounting field. And so I was telling a friend the other day that I quickly learned in this very traditional Southern banking organization that in order to, kind of make it up the ladder, so to speak, with even within the organization, you either had to know somebody or have an advanced degree.
Mhm.
And I really didn't know anybody. I didn't have, a lot of connections that would really get me places. And so I decided an advanced degree is, the route that I needed to take.
Mhm.
And I was like tossing around the idea of an MBA or a law degree. And I just happened to have connections with a couple of lawyers through a course that I took through the bank on the legal aspects of trust relationships, and then also with a business law professor from my college. And talk to them and realize that the law is there's such a wide range of things you can do when you study law. and that it, would continually challenge me. And it was only one more year more than an MBA. So yeah, I decided to go to law school. And I left North Carolina and came to Maryland to go to law school. One reason is I really wanted to basically, leave North Carolina just because I wanted to live in a different place. But I was also enamored with the idea of going to school in the DC area. And at the time that I was actually applying, I didn't realize that the professional schools for the University of Maryland were not in College Park, which is closer to DC. They're actually in Baltimore. But nonetheless, I decided to come to school, to go to the University of Maryland Law School, located in Baltimore.
Right.
Um,
And that was a full-time thing, right? Because you
yeah,
left.
yeah, exactly. Yes. So so law school's 3 years generally. If you do it part-time, it's it can be 4 years, but I decided to do it in the 3-year full-time program. And in fact, that's probably the only chunk of time in my life that I actually haven't worked at a paying job, because it was very strongly recommended in almost all the literature that I read that you shouldn't work during your first year of law school. And so because of my accounting background, I ended up taking a lot of tax courses in law school. And then I started working at a large law firm in Baltimore when I got out of law school, and was there for a long time, about 7 years, in primarily the business litigation or commercial litigation department. And I made a lifestyle change. And I really think that most of the changes, well, actually all the changes that I've made in my career, beginning then and then, since then, have been for lifestyle reasons. So that change that I made, going from a large law firm that's, a high pressure environment, you're, obviously pressured to work many more hours than most people care to work in a general week. And that, so I went from there to working for the Howard County Office of Law, which is essentially the general counsel for the county.
Right. So pause for a second.
Okay.
I want to make an observation and see what your thoughts are.
Okay.
You were working as internal auditing, and
Correct.
then made a decision that for career purposes, the degree or the networking, and you decided on the degree, and then you quit your job and went full-time into law.
Correct.
So
Law school, right.
law school, yeah, a big
Yes,
change,
huge
right?
change.
Huge change. And
Yes.
then you come out, and then you're working for a large firm with the normal pressure cooker for hours and billable, clients and all that kind of stuff. And then again, after a few years, big change. So
Right.
for people who haven't done those, and you say it so matter of factly, and yet
Right.
for a lot of people, making a big change can be very challenging.
Yeah.
How have you been able to make those big career changes in your history? Like, what is it that you think you draw upon that helps you make those big decisions?
So, like I said, the changes that I've made in my career have been for lifestyle reasons. And what I mean by that is that I look at my life and think, okay, do I want, my work to control my life, or do I want to be able to somehow, control my work so that I can have, I guess, a better life? And that, when I say better life, a better lifestyle, not so crazy hours and such. So I think it really, in most situations, boils down to the person, because some people in their life, let's say, want to make a certain amount of money, or, want to get to a particular level in an organization or whatnot, want to start an app. That's the goal. And if that's the goal, that's kind of what they want in their life. And so if they're working crazy hours, then it's all worth it. For me, I, there was a time in my early career when I looked forward and I thought I'm going to want, I want to have a family. And I certainly don't want to work these kinds of crazy hours if if I have a family. I don't want to pay somebody to take care of my kids while I go work. But a lot of people are fine with doing that. So it's really, so I think what really helped me when I made those changes is knowing deep down
Yeah,
that's kind of what
you say it so easily, and yet in my experience, a lot of people don't really know what's super important to them. But it sounds like
right.
you've always had that center. You know what's important to you, and then it's easy to make those decisions because you have that core value.
It's easy to make the decisions. Sometimes it's really difficult to implement.
Hmm.
And what I say is, in fact, I was just telling my daughter this the other day. She's got a very kind of a high pressure, job, and I said, but she's also got a life, and likes to go hiking on the weekends and camping and engage in all sorts of activities. I said, a lot of times you have to work hard so that you don't work so hard. And what I said, what I meant by that is that if you want to kind of carve out the lifestyle, the lifestyle that you want, you have to be very firm about what your boundaries are, what your time limitations are, and really make sure you know how to say no. You know that people are going to be making more money than you, or maybe driving fancier cars, assuming you've chosen the path where you don't make as much money. But yeah, you have to be okay with that, and sometimes it's hard.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's neat. So I cut you off. You
yeah,
had
okay,
worked for the large firm and then decided lifestyle. Take us from that point.
yeah. So let me give you a really quick story about um, the large firm. So I was at a large firm back in, well, I left in the early 90s. So, kind of at that time we barely had PCs on our desks. Just to give you an idea of, the era. And I was kind of a rabble rouser, a feminist rabble rouser, um, back at the firm that I worked for. And I knew that I wanted to make a life. I knew that I couldn't or didn't want to work the hours that I was working if I decided to have a family. So I went to the managing partner of the firm, who I actually worked with a whole lot, and I liked him a lot and he liked me a lot. We both respected each other greatly, and just kind of threw out the idea of a lawyer working part-time.
Hmm.
And at the time there were no lawyers working part-time. And I think he knew he couldn't say no immediately, so he's like, well, we'll take it back to the executive committee. Did that. A couple of weeks later he comes back and says, okay, well, we've discussed this and we are going to allow you or anybody else, in your situation, depending on the circumstances, whatever, to work part-time. And so basically what that will mean is you'll get paid 3/5 of your salary. And I thought the next comment was going to be working 3 days a week.
Right.
And he said, well, you'd be working Monday through Friday from 9 to 5. So that was part-time.
Wow.
Which just shows you, the type of hours that you put in a job like that.
Wow.
Yeah. So I went to work full time, working those hours
Right.
with the local government. Fortunately with the local government, um, it's you can work a 9 to 5 job. Given, I mean, obviously there are a lot of exceptions, but I took a cut in pay, certainly going from a large law firm to local government. And then I think the next major change I made, again for a lifestyle reason, was to go part-time. So I worked for the Office of Law, and after my first daughter was born, realized I would love to be able to not work 5 days a week, to be able to have time during the week. to spend with my my daughter.
Mhm.
So, and then eventually I had, you know, two daughters. And so I was really fortunate. At that time, I worked for a woman who had three children, and because I had been there at that office a while, and I had really developed a good reputation, I was allowed to work part time. So I took a cut in pay. um, and so that was kind of like the next bigger, bigger change. And then the next biggest change was starting my own practice, which was about 10 years after I
Wow.
went to work.
And what made you take that leap? And that's also a tremendous leap, right?
Yeah, huge. So, and I will say, I had the luxury of not being the sole breadwinner in my family, and I completely recognized that as a luxury. It was a privilege that I had, but that's not to say that my salary didn't contribute to the overall family economic situation. So the the reason, so I was there for about 10 years at the local government office of law, and was kind of getting bored. um, and also I just had this, I got very I disappointed, I think, when I saw a lot of county workers who were all great people, but there were seemed to be so many people who just like were literally counting the days until they retire.
Mm.
And that mentality just did not
Complacency.
work with me.
Right.
Yeah. And I wanted more of a challenge, but also I wanted more flexibility.
Mm.
Even though I worked part-time, I really wanted to take more control over my work hours.
Mhm.
Because my daughters were young at the time, and my husband at the time traveled a whole lot. And so I was kind of the one, doing everything, during the day, making sure if they were sick, I was able to stay home from work and whatnot. So, yeah, so it took me a long time to make that decision. It really did. And I think one of the catalysts that really helped me push that decision along much more quickly than I might have was the very unexpected death of my older sister.
Mm.
Um, and it just kind of threw me for a loop, threw our whole family for a loop. And when something like that happens, you just kind of really think about your life, right? And like, hey, I'm not going to make this decision now, then I might never make the decision. So that was kind of help spur my decision to basically quit, a job with a steady salary and benefits, start my own practice.
Wow. Katherine, it's amazing story. And, for me, the obvious takeaway is that you have such a rock solid core of knowing who you are and what is important to you, that these major decisions that you've made in your career just seem to come easily. I mean, just hearing you throw them out. And that's such an amazing takeaway for me and hopefully the other people as well. I want to thank you for sharing your journey,
Thank
your
you.
wisdom. Hopefully it was enjoyable, and I hope people are inspired by that insight.
Thank you. Yes, that would be great. People are inspired.